Good morning and welcome to STEAM-focused PBL in an online and in-person learning environment. I'm Dr. Stacy Settery and I'm the Outreach and Innovation Coordinator from Monroe County Community School Corporation.
And I'm Katie Sparks. I'm the STEM and Computer Science Coach for MCCSC, and I'm also teaching 4th and 5th grade online this year.
We're going to start by just briefly going over what is project-based learning, also mostly known as PBL. This information is from PBL Works, which is a great resource also for project-based learning. But PBL is basically a teaching method in which students learn by actively engaging in real world with meaningful projects. The students usually do this over an extended period of time, so this isn't something we normally do within a week or just a week or two. And it engages them in solving real world problems and answering a complete or complex question. As a result of what we do, the students usually have deeper content knowledge as well as critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, and communication skills. The reason our district really got into project-based learning is because we had a grant for the past 2 years called the Ready Schools Grant, and we had to really interview stakeholders and go through a whole design thinking process to find out what is it that our stakeholders want for our students. And really, we want to make sure our students are college, career, and life ready when they graduate. So pre-K through 12, we looked at what are the areas we need to focus on. And through all that design thinking process, we came up with 5 focus areas. The first and main one was project-based learning. The others were STEAM and hands-on learning, career awareness, entrepreneurship, and community and industry partnerships. So because project-based learning was so important, we really wanted to make sure we were able to do that this year, even with the pandemic, even if we couldn't do some of the training and things like that that we had originally planned. In addition, it aligns with Indiana's goals for having every teacher aligned with training in project-based learning. So how did we start? First, we looked at the Indiana Science Standards and our FOSS curriculum. We know in our district, it's hard to find time to teach social studies and science as much as it is easier to do language arts and math. So we really wanted to figure out how can we, whether we're online or in person, be able to teach science to our students. So we started by identifying 1 unit per grade per quarter, and that allowed us to cover most, if not all, standards in every grade level. Katie will now tell you about the components for each PBL unit we created.
Thanks, Stacy. So I've been going through the Ford NGLU training that I know many educators across the state were a part of. I was part of the first cohort that started back in the summer of 2019. And so we wanted to make sure that even though we couldn't do the full training, as Stacy mentioned, we could still start to introduce teachers to this vocabulary and still use a lot of the same terms that they will be using once they really dive into PBL and we're able to give them full training. So we call this PBL Light because we know that it's not as in-depth as you know, a true PBL unit that a teacher might plan for their students, but it still has a lot of the same components. The other thing that was super important for us was that it was usable for students either in school or at home, or if we're flipping back and forth, a combination of the two. We wanted them to be really flexible. So we wanted it to be mostly independent work so that even if a teacher is using it in class, it could be something that the students are doing independently while the teacher is either working with a small group, socially distanced, of course, or you know, students could do at home by watching our videos and completing the project. So we started with the driving question. Like all PBLs, we wanted to make sure that that was really a defining for every student and every teacher. What is the focus here? What is the problem that we're trying to solve? And we use the language, how do we either do or create for a purpose? And that's kind of the sentence stem that we started with when creating these PBLs. We also identified an authentic problem to be solved throughout the unit. So something that the students could really grab onto and keep in mind as they're working through their unit. And this real world problem is hopefully something that'll engage the students and make them want to keep coming back the next day to find out more. Community partners are a huge part of project-based learning, and they really make the experience more authentic for the students. But we knew that from our lens, you know, at the district level, when we're pushing this out to 14 elementary schools, it's hard to find community partners that can commit the kind of time to work with 14 different schools. You know, if you figure there's a couple teachers at each grade level per school, you might be asking a community partner to connect with 30 to 40 different classes, and that's just not reasonable. So what we did for the community partner was we recommended that the teacher connect with a community partner, and we tried to point out real world connections throughout our units. We always start with an entry event, so a super engaging first lesson that introduces the unit and kind of draws the kids in. And we also had benchmark activities throughout. So what are the learning activities, the mini lessons, the check-ins that you're doing throughout the unit to make sure the students are actually mastering the standards. So it's not just a super engaging project, but it also does address learning standards, you know, that align to our pacing guides and align to the Indiana standards. We also wanted to provide some flexibility, but also define a clear end product for what the students are going to do, what is it they're actually making. And then we thought it was important to include 16 days of activities for each teacher to push out to their students. Now, obviously, the teachers had the autonomy to, you know, swap out a lesson here or there. They could skip a lesson if they didn't feel like it was necessary. They could combine, but we provided 16 days of activities, 4 weeks with 4 days per week, Monday through Thursday for 4 weeks. So basically it's your science lessons for a month. When we were planning, we really wanted to think about the cross-curricular piece and tying in multiple standards from multiple subject areas. Of course, these are STEAM focused, as Stacy mentioned, and we started with science standards to kind of pull that driving question. But what we did was after we knew what the first quarter science standard was that we were going to address, we looked on our pacing guides and we said, okay, what are some math skills that students are working on in the first quarter? What are some ELA skills and some social studies skills? And even what are some of those employability skills that are important at the beginning of the year? We tried to pull all those together into our first quarter unit so that a teacher, no matter the school, if they're following our pacing guide, this project-based learning unit will address the standards in each of these subject areas for the first quarter. We included that on our planning documents that Stacy is going to show you.
This is an example of the first grade. This was quarter one's FOSS and PBL. And we did use our FOSS units, but we did find that some of the FOSS units didn't either have enough information or didn't necessarily completely align with the Indiana standards. And sometimes we had to create some of our own or find some of our own material as well. So here you could see which science standards were included, which FOSS kit we used, and the driving question and everything Katie spoke about. And then as we get further down, we see what kind of activity is each day. So if the teacher just wants to get an idea of what's going to happen, they can just get a quick glance from this document. So we're going to show you the third grade. We just made one for rocks, minerals, and fossils. And so this is one that I had just recently worked on. And we put ours into Canvas because that's the learning management system that our school uses. And we knew if we wanted teachers to use these units, we needed to make them ready and easily accessible for the teachers. And that was really our goal. We knew that this year was going to be tougher than any other. How can we take something off the plate of teachers? So if we just told them, here's a bunch of lessons, go do it, it wouldn't be as easy as them just importing this into their learning course. Now, if you use Google Classroom or something like that, this could still be done just using your learning management system. So as Katie mentioned, we have 16 days worth of lessons. And so each unit has a home page like this. And the teacher then can click on it and they can get to the unit introduction. And along with doing some kind of hook that we want to use, and some of our hooks will be able to be more creative than others, you know, with the format that we're doing. But something we also tried to include is career awareness, because like I said in the earlier part, that was also one of our 5 focus areas. So with this unit, how can we as junior geologists share information about the impact of rocks and minerals on our everyday lives? So the students are able to make a connection with the real world. They learn about geologists, and then they're told that they're going to figure out at the end of the unit, they're going to make a project that informs the audience about the importance of rocks and minerals in our everyday life. So they're told right from the start what the end goal will be. Each day's lesson says what you're going to learn about and what materials you need. So the teachers literally can just take this, import it into their course, and it's good to go. They should change due dates and they might add something or they might change something little, but it's there if they want it. Each day's lesson, we tried to make hands on when possible. Our target was like a 15 to 30-minute lesson. We know that it's hard to find the time, but we wanted to make it a good, worthwhile 15 to 30 minutes. So we tried to tie in literacy hands on. With this unit for mineral hardness, we provided teachers the option to have students come pick up some examples of minerals, and we provided the nails and things like that that were necessary so they could do the hands-on mineral hardness check where they are taking the nail and scratching the mineral and saying how hard it is and then comparing it with Mohs scale. They're using the book from Foss Webb to be able to look at and read the story along with it. But we really wanted this to be hands-on and the students to be able to do it. If a student isn't able to pick up that material, they watch the lesson. You can see this video here, walks through it step by step and shows the mineral so the student can look at the mineral and say, oh, I do see a scratch there, or no, I don't see a scratch, and can do it themselves. If a teacher is doing this in school, the materials are there. Even if next year and we're all in person again, this is still something the teacher can use. They can even use it when they're working in small groups with other students. Students can work on this independently. So it was really important to us to make these usable no matter what students have and where they are. We tried to incorporate some fun activities. So like this one for rocks and minerals, we wanted the students to learn about the different types of rocks. Well, this was a fun day where they could choose how do they want to make their own. And the teacher would let parents know ahead of time if they needed any materials. We did create a letter that was sent home for the beginning of each unit with what materials would be needed. But here's the 3 different types of rocks, and the students have different ways of fun ways to make it. So if a teacher normally does a fun Friday or something like that, this doesn't have to be used on a Thursday. They could use it whenever they want. So we tried to provide different opportunities. Some of the days it is a little bit more of, here's a presentation and you're going to take some notes and then do a virtual tour. Then usually the last week is our project where we present the project and then the students have a few days to work on it. We tried to provide a few options for what the project could be. The teacher may add additional ones. She may change the choices, but we provided a few. And then the students usually submit the project on the last day or the day before. Whenever possible, we tried to have where we have the students submit their project where other students can provide feedback as well. So that way they are shared with an audience, and then the other students can see their work also, so they can see what they've made and the students get to see the entire class's work. Katie's going to now talk about a kindergarten lesson that she did.
Thanks, Stacy. So let me go ahead and share my screen now. Okay, so as Stacy mentioned, we made these units for K to 6 teachers to use in their classrooms, and we really wanted to focus on our adopted curriculum, which is FOSS. I'm teaching 4th and 5th grade online right now, so Stacy talked a lot about what this looked like up front at the beginning of the year when we were creating these and before we rolled them out to teachers and what kinds of things we thought about. But now that I've been actually teaching these units with my students, I want to talk about it a little bit more from a teacher lens as well. So as a teacher, and obviously if your district isn't providing these types of lessons, these are some things that I would keep in mind if you're trying to plan your own PBL unit to use with your students. One of the things that we wanted to make sure that we included was this calendar page. And I think this is really helpful for students to be able to see where we're going, for parents to be able to see where we're going with this. So it's up to you, of course, personal preference, if you publish out the entire month or if you just publish one day at a time, maybe you just publish 1 week at a time, that's up to you. But there is a chance at least for students to see what's coming. So this is a kindergarten unit. It's based on the FOSS curriculum. It also uses pieces of Picture Perfect STEM. I'll talk about that in a minute. But the driving question is, how can we use different materials to make things move? And it's a force and motion unit in kindergarten. So for this PBL introduction, the day 1 lesson, our entry event is to watch this little video. It's about swings, slides, and science. And of course, as a new kindergartner thinking about a playground and being outside and all the fun that would come with that is an engaging way. Of course, if we were in person, the teacher could take the kids outside and actually try some of these things on the playground. But then the other thing that we did right off the bat was to set up the science notebook. So this is just a short video of me explaining how to set up your science notebook to kindergartners. And I use a little whiteboard, show them exactly what to draw, exactly what to write. There's points in the video where it says, okay, now pause your video and draw that in your science notebook. And I think a lot of times, whenever we're virtual or even if we're in person, but focusing on using more technology, we lose sight of kids drawing models and things, especially as it relates to science, but that is a really important piece that we wanted to keep. So we do have the use of science notebooks throughout. And when the kids come pick up supplies, there are notebooks that are often included in the supply kit for a unit. So the day one lesson for this particular unit is a video about swings, slides, and science, and then how to set up your science notebook. Of course, in kindergarten, it includes mostly drawing pictures up front, whereas the older grades, it would include taking some notes, maybe including some tables and some data, things like that. If we head back, then I'll just show you a few of the different lessons. So the way that this lesson plan is set up for the month is after the introduction, we investigate different materials and how they move and how they absorb water, how they're the same, how they're different. We use our different senses for these observations, but the things that we're focusing on are wood, paper, and fabric. And there are in the FOSS kits, again, our adopted curriculum, there are like little sample materials for the students. So if as a teacher, I could put together bags of materials, just like Stacy mentioned, and I could tell my students to come pick them up at this time, if that's something that your school does. However, these are also things that you could have at home, right? Like drop some water on your jeans, drop some water on a different type, like some cotton fabric, so that we tried as much as possible to make it so that the students could do it at home. And then if the students don't have the materials at home and they can't go to pick them up, we did include the videos that they could watch. So for example, what happens when fabric gets wet? If the students don't have the fabric at home, they could just watch the video where I use my water dropper and I drop the water on the different types of fabric and observe what happens. You can see there's even directions, and it says this in the video, to pause throughout and make sure that you're trying it out. It says like pause the video here and you try it. And it reminds the students to do that as well, to work alongside the videos. And then of course it tells them to draw a picture of what happens. We also thought it was really important to talk about how to submit those pictures, especially for the students that are online. How do you submit the drawings that you've made to your teacher? If you're in person, this could be as simple as turning in your science notebook at the end of the day, but maybe that's not feasible for you for whatever reason. So we included directions for how to submit a photo on Canvas so the students can take a picture of their work, submit it that way. That's something that you could do if you're using another learning management system as well. Again, as the teacher, when I'm ready to assign this to my class, all I have to do is publish this page and insert my due date when I want students to turn this in by. I'll show you a few more pages here. Let's see, we always love things that get kids outside, right? Especially at the beginning of the year when the weather's still nice. So this one, the materials that they needed were a ball, a safe place to play outside, an empty plastic bottle, and their science notebook and pencil. So today they got to go outside and try rolling their ball on different surfaces, either at school, like the playground, or at home, meaning like the driveway, if you have a play set in your backyard, maybe a slide, maybe on your deck, maybe on your porch, whatever it is. So the object of today's lesson was to go outside and test this ball on a few different surfaces. We talked about predicting where you thought the ball would roll, and then placing an empty bottle. So just using a plastic bottle, I think my ball is going to roll to here, and then trying that roll again. Again, we're looking at different things like how fast is the ball rolling? How can I change the direction of the way that the ball rolls? Things like that. And again, there is a video that they can watch to see that in action if they weren't able to do it for some reason. This one just had some reflection questions. So sometimes we didn't require that the students turn something in every time. Sometimes we require that they turn in a video of themselves talking about things. You know, I think as with anything, it's important to give kids multiple ways to show what they know. So in this case, they had to record a video of themselves answering these reflection questions and submit that to us as well. So, you know, not always drawing something or writing something, but also giving kids a chance to verbally explain what they've done. Go back here, and I want to talk a little bit about the last week. So Picture Perfect STEM is one of the STEM curriculum that is approved by the DOE. And MCCSC was fortunate enough to purchase it through a grant. Several of our schools already had it and were using it, but we were able to purchase some district-wide sets. If you're not familiar with Picture Perfect STEM, it is a series that basically takes picture books and ties them to STEM or engineering challenges. And so this particular one uses the book, and it's not the whole, I mean, the whole unit would be several days. We just kind of took the book and the challenge and kind of condensed it, picked a few different pieces. But basically, I read aloud the book Newton and Me for the kids, and they get to, so I kind of talk through the book. In the book, there's a boy and his dog who are experiencing he's riding his bike super fast down the hill. It's hard to get up the hill. So there's all kinds of forces at work throughout this book. Then the next day, their job is to create a system that parks the dog who's in a car in his doghouse. So they can use all sorts of different things. Excuse my faces, this happens to me every single time. But we used a whiteboard as our ramp and a cup with a little hole cut out of it as our doghouse, and the students have to create a system that will get the dog, which is a little car, parked in its doghouse. So they might change how high they want the ramp to start to adjust the speed. They might put some sort of fabric in between the ramp and the doghouse to kind of slow the dog down. They might put some sort of weight behind the doghouse so it doesn't move. So they can manipulate this situation in all kinds of ways, using the fabric samples, using wood samples that we've used throughout the unit, kind of bringing everything together here at the end. And this is one that really is open to the kids' interpretation of what materials they have at home too. You know, like a student that wasn't able to pick up materials at school might use, some other fabrics and weights that they have around the house. But we ask them to make a drawing of what they create and submit that here. Again, looking for multiple ways for the kids to show what they know. So I think the other thing that we've learned throughout this process, and I've learned especially as a teacher, it is so incredibly helpful to have these units pre-made and ready to go. I know if you're a teacher sitting here watching this right now and you're thinking like, well, that's all great, but I certainly don't have time to do that. We totally get that. And that's kind of where this idea came from. But, if that's kind of where you are, we would encourage you to maybe try a week-long PBL unit that starts with, a driving question and then kind of builds into maybe a final product by the end of the week and just hits pieces of it throughout the week. I've done shorter ones with my 4th and 5th graders too. So I think we've learned that teachers, if you're in a district or coaching position, I think my biggest piece of advice would be anything that you can make for teachers that's ready to go is going to be very, very appreciated and widely used. We've been blown away by the number of teachers that have been using these resources, especially during a year when there's already a lot going on. We honestly weren't sure if teachers were going to embrace this, but because it's ready for them to go and because it's one less thing that they're having to plan, PBL has been happening, all over our district because it's there for teachers and ready to roll. If you are a teacher and you're in a position where you're trying to make this happen at your school, I would say start small. And if you can, team up with other teachers and kind of divide the work that way, because this certainly was not one person pulling all of these units together. So I think that has been extremely helpful as well. I'm going to turn it back over to Stacy now to talk about what exactly we did provide to teachers and parents as well.
I just want to add in case you're in a small school and you want to pair up with another school, another teacher, and there's only, one or two people per grade level, you might be able to combine some standards for different grade levels into some units. As I've worked on some of these units, I've seen very similar standards are being addressed, that you could possibly do a K1 together, and knowing that the students next year may not need this, or they didn't do kindergarten this way. So a review of that information might not be bad when they're in first grade or whatnot. So the resource we provided to the teachers were the directions on how to import the units into their Canvas page, which at this point in the year, they're probably fine with. But when we started this at the beginning of the year, teachers were brand new to Canvas in elementary school. We created that planning document that we showed you earlier. We also had a letter for parents that kind of just the teachers could use if they wanted. And it just explained, we're about to do this PBL unit, and then here's the different materials we're going to use each week. And so that way the parents, if they wanted to be able to provide those resources, they could. We also provided supplies for the students learning at home. We made sure that we had those available. We have a science resource center at our district, but I know a lot of schools just have their science kits and whatnot that we could still do that from. And we gave them that complete unit that was ready for Canvas. Here we have two of our teachers who provided feedback. Mandy Gwynn is actually also an instructional coach at one of our Title I elementary schools, and she is teaching third grade this year. So she's going to talk to how it really helped the teacher and how they appreciated it. And Katie did say ours are being used. We've asked teachers to fill out a very quick survey on how many kids they're planning on using it with when they download one of these units. And we have 14 elementary schools. All 14 elementary schools have responded to that survey at least once with a teacher. And we've had over 45 responses with over 1,000 kids using these. And we know of several teachers who are using them and didn't fill out the survey too. So we know they're actually really being used. And that's exciting for us to know, because, especially when you create things, you don't know where it's going to go. And we've heard a ton of positive feedback. So here's Mandy.
Stacy, we can't hear that very well.
Let me pause. Let me see if I can get my volume louder maybe as well. And see if it's better.
It's still pretty hard to hear her.
Still hard to hear her. Let's see if our next one is any better. Lindsay Paulson teaches first grade at a school that is all K through 2, and she's going to talk about the students and teachers. Hopefully.
We can't hear her very well, but I do think that this video is worth letting it play because it has all the great pictures of the kids at home doing their PBL. So maybe you could just kind of give a recap of what she was saying, or what her and Mandy kind of said while we watched the pictures.
Yeah, her unit was on solids and liquids, and they at the end had to create their own solid or liquid. And so she kind of throughout this shows some of the things that the students worked on. And they did do 5 senses as part of this unit. And she is completely teaching online, so all of her students were at home working on this.
I love how she shows all the different things that they do away from a screen too. Like they were outside measuring shadows, they've engineered things, they've done a lot of writing and modeling in their science notebooks. I think her pictures do a really good job of capturing the range of activities.
Yes. So if you have any questions, we know this is recorded, so you can't ask live, but both of us are happy to answer any questions via email. And if there's anything we can share with you that would be helpful, we'd be happy to do that. Um, so we hope this was useful. I think that the idea is if you spend some time, or even if you could ask your central office to spend some time creating these, the same could be done for social studies if that's what you wanted to do. Of course, our language arts or math, but science really lended itself to these units. And it was really, not only was it fun for the students to do, I really have enjoyed working on making them also. And so there's a lot of resources out there, even if you don't have FOSS. And if you're using, programs such as Edpuzzle or finding YouTube videos, if you don't have time to read the story and do that recording, you can find a recording on YouTube of most stories based on, because of all last spring, how many teachers were posting videos. So there's a lot of resources out there that can help make it quicker to do them if you need to.
And I think too, keeping in mind that the entire state of Indiana right now is really focused on project-based learning and improving STEM education as part of the state STEM plan. So just knowing that we're all in this together and there's people all over the state that have similar goals. This has been one way that we've been able to really get a lot of quick buy-in from our teachers into this STEM and PBL focused education, because it is something that they can do, flexibly. They can do it in person, they can do it at home, and the kids are really engaged, which is what it's all about.
I do want to add to that. That was an unexpected bonus of this. We were really upset that we weren't able to send all our teachers to this in-person training that we wanted to do. We had some schools that were going to be really starting PBL this year, and we were worried that without doing it, were we going to lose excitement? How was that going to happen? And I think there's actually more teachers excited and interested and with buy-in to PBL than we had beforehand. So as we move towards our official training of all of our teachers, I think we're in a better position than we would have been had we not had the pandemic and made these units. So
agreed.
Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, we look forward to hearing from you.